Together with American Songwriter, we had the opportunity to talk to Kristin and Kari of the Brightsiders. Both Kristin and Kari talked about where they grew up and how they got into music. Kristin is also a part of the Americana old-time music group Uncle Earl, with Kari being a child psychiatrist. Together, they created this amazing record, which even features Ed Helms, comedian Ed Helms, actor Ed Helms, and a bunch of other amazing artists. They've created this record with the purpose of helping children connect with their emotions. Make sure to check out the Brightsiders' brand new record. And check out our past interviews and videos, which are up now on our Facebook page and YouTube channel at Bringing It Backwards. And it'd be awesome if you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bringing Back Pod.
We'd appreciate your support if you follow and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're Bringing It Backwards with the Brightsiders. All right, well, this podcast is on your guys' journey in music and how you got to where you are, and we'll talk about how you guys met and the new record that you guys put out.
Yay!
Right. Well, Kristin, why don't you start? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Portland, Oregon.
Very cool, Portland, Oregon. And you're in Nashville. I did see that.
Yeah, now I live in Nashville, and I took a circuitous route. I'm a rare native Oregonian, which is crazy to have grown up there because so many of my friends moved there. But that was, I guess, kind of after I left. I went to college in Montreal, and then I got really into traditional folk music in Canada, and then came back to the States and got a job in a group that does traditional percussive dance. So that was kind of like my entry into the music scene. And I played a lot of, I played traditional music, basically, traditional American music. And and I don't even know if you were going to ask me, like, how did I get from Portland to Nashville? But
I'm curious.
Answer you that question, right?
Yeah, I'm very curious.
So I was in this dance company, and we did traditional percussive dance styles, which is basically clogging and step dancing and tap and the sort of percussive dances that came from all the various immigration that came to America, created those dance forms. And that was an amazing sort of actual job that I had after college, and it introduced me to a lot of other musicians who I got the bug to play fiddle and then play guitar and started writing songs. And now I just dance a little bit, but sort of through that scene, I made it up to Boston, where there was a really thriving traditional music community in the early 2000s. And then a lot of those people I knew in Boston eventually moved to New York, and I just sort of followed the path down to Brooklyn, New York, where I was playing music, and I was touring in an old-time string band that also does some original music called Uncle Earl. I played guitar and danced and sang in that band, and it's through Uncle Earl and through living in Brooklyn that I met Kari Groff.
Oh, okay. So Kari,
and then eventually I left New York and came to Nashville. But I'll do a little stop in Brooklyn so you can ask Kari.
I have a quick question.
Whatever you want to ask Kari.
What part of Nashville are you in?
Oh, I'm in Madison right now, actually. I'm in Madison, right on the Cumberland River.
Oh,
just
very
about 15 minutes north of Nashville. So
Yeah, we're moving to Spring Hill. That's why I was curious.
Oh, fun. Really? When are you moving?
Within the next 6 months.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
See you here. I'm trying to talk Kari into moving.
Eventually, I'll probably move to Nashville.
Yeah, I heard spring. We're going this weekend to check out everything, but I heard Spring Hill is it's south, but I heard it's like they're building it up and stuff, so it should be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's probably kind of like the opposite end of I started in Nashville, living in East Nashville. It's just sort of like anyway, I guess maybe the Brooklyn of Nashville or something. And Madison and Spring Hill are more like next wave, just like the next circle out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Kristin or Kari, how did you get into music?
So I grew up in a very musical family.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, which is a place that's very renowned for their public music school program. Because my grandfather was Yeah, my grandfather was the director of the whole public music school system. And then my father was a music teacher. My mother was a music teacher. They met at Oberlin Conservatory, where our co-producer, Chris Eldridge, is now teaching classes. So we have this, and Ed Helms, who's on our album, also went to Oberlin, right, Kristin?
Mm-hmm.
So we have
really?
my parents.
I was going to ask
yeah.
how you guys met him. That's pretty cool.
And so, yeah, we have an Oberlin connection. I grew up in a musical family. I've been playing violin since I was a small child through the Suzuki method. That's how I started. Mm-hmm. And I was very much into classical music, or at least played classical music. I don't know how into classical music I was, to be honest with you. But I played classical music for a long time, and I've always wanted to tell this story. And it happened in medical school when I was still playing classical music, sort of on the side when I had time in an orchestra. But I went to Disney World, of all places, for a vacation. And I saw an Irish fiddler in the Epcot Center, like UK, welcome to the UK.
Oh,
stage.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, she came out and she played this whole Irish fiddle solo. And I was like, I would give anything in the world to do that. Anything. I was like, that's incredible. I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that so badly. So I got home from Disney World and I was back in like anatomy lab and, biochemistry and in the hospital. But I got these fiddle books on the side that I would try to read the music of. And quickly I realized that you really can't learn fiddle from just reading music. Mm-hmm. And so I went to a camp. I went to a Shokin Fiddle and Music dance camp where I got introduced to old time music and kept at it. And then eventually sort of mostly gave up playing classical music and pursued more intensely the study of Americana and British Isles style fiddling. And through that camp, I got introduced to Kristin's music of Uncle Earl, and then eventually met Kristin at the camp because she was with Raina Gellert, one of her bandmates who was teaching there, and Kristin was teaching, and we met, and I asked her if she would help me with this child psychiatry music project.
Wow.
So that, it's sort of a funny journey, of growing up in this very classical family, going to medical school, but then having this real drive and interest to pursue traditional fiddle styles. And it was like a burning intensity. It was like a passion that I couldn't ignore, really, truly. And even with medical school and residency and all of that, like I had to pursue it. Also with songwriting, my mom is a great songwriter. So I grew up listening to her write songs for children.
Your mom is a great songwriter. I mean, even some of the songs on our record were your mom's idea, right?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Sort of. Yeah. Yeah. Like she would definitely come up with sort of, there's a couple of them like The Mad Day and the Oops song where she really put heavy influence. But she's a great songwriter. She's a great lyricist. She's really good at rhyming. And then my daughter, who's 10 years old, is, I think, an even better songwriter than both my mother and myself. So there's something that comes from early exposure to songwriting. But the way the project came about is because I had to do a sort of like a creative or artistic project at NYU Child Study Center where I was training. And I chose to do a very small collection of songs, and I needed help producing the songs. So I asked Kristin, who agreed. And so we did a few songs in the studio, and they turned out great. And then somehow, as we marched forward in time and became better and better friends, and had a lot of fun doing it, it became more of this like mission-based project where we actually decided, hey, let's actually make a real album about emotions in the style of something like Marlo Thomas's Free to Be You and Me. We started to get like bigger ideas and took that momentum with all the people that were living in Brooklyn at the time and just sort of went with it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So Kristin, was
Have
this
Have
your...
you heard? Yeah.
Sorry,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to ask, how'd you get in? Was this your first experience with writing children's music?
Well, kind of yes and no. It was my first experience with consciously trying to write children's music. I think that there's somehow, like when I started writing songs, maybe because I played music as a kid. I played piano. My grandma ran the church choir. I played a little bit of music, but I never really studied it seriously. I definitely never thought I would be a professional musician when I grew up. And when I started writing songs, it might have been just like from such a beginner's mind kind of place in my 20s, where I think the first songs that just sort of came out of me ended up being children's songs. Because I was just approaching it from such a basic and place of no expectations. I was just sort of learning how to play instruments and writing songs at the same time. So the first song that I wrote that people sort of liked, they like a song when they're like, sing that song you wrote, and like that my friends wanted me to keep singing was this song called Crayola Doesn't Make a Color for Your Eyes. I actually wrote it as a present for a friend of mine when we were having a conversation about like, what color are your eyes? Are they green? Are they blue? Or they're bluish green? And I wrote this song that was kind of based with this patty cake rhythm. That was something I was doing a lot in the dance performances. I was a part of the dance company at that time. Okay. So, and I barely could play any instruments. I mean, I just could barely play a chordal instrument. So that's one of the reasons that was a limitation. So I wrote this song with a patty cake rhythm, and it became popular with kids, is why I'm bringing it up. So it was, in fact, it actually was like a hit song on kids' radio.
That's cool.
When I recorded it. Yeah, it's really cool, and I'm proud of it. But it was
happen?
it was kind of an accident.
Yeah, how did it get to radio and everything?
It got to radio because, I had been touring with my band Uncle Earl. So I was playing, traditional fiddle band music. And I guess I had enough sort of contacts from the festival circuit that we were on and the radio circuit of, I knew enough people in the business. I had been doing this for a couple of years. I knew enough people in the business at that point that when I sort of self-released, that band was on Rounder Records, and we had, people helping us release those albums. But when I put out my own record, which had the Crayola song on it, and I just recorded that in my kitchen, and Mark Schatz produced it. We did it. It was very much at home project, and I just sent off to disc makers and got my 1,000 copies of the CD, and I just put them in envelopes with a Post-it note on the top of the CD, and I mailed it to every radio station that I sort of could think of, and including some of the kids shows. And I just literally put a Post-it note on that was just like, hey, people say the first track on this record is a kid's song. Take it. And it started getting spins, wow. So like maybe that was like a different era or something. But so I think maybe that was one reason. I'm not sure that Kari was like, when we encountered each other and we liked each other's music, and she was like, well, maybe you could help me with, producing these couple of tracks that were already really, just brilliant songs. And so, at that time, I was like, well, maybe I could try to make kids music. So there's a long answer to your question, but this is the first project where I put my intention into writing for children.
Got it.
And Kari already had some really great songs. And then, in fact, a similar thing happened where, I called she called some musicians she knew, I called some that I knew, and we had this studio time in Brooklyn. We recorded 3 or 4 tracks, and it was sort of meant to be like, Kari, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was almost like a class project. It was like the end result was just to turn in for her fellowship. It wasn't like meant to be this international release. This is years ago now, but people liked it, and they were like, you should make a real record. And so that was kind of the seed of this thing. And, then we were like, well, if we're going to make a record, we need to write more songs. so that was when we started actually writing together, and being like, well, what other topics, should be on this record. And in the meantime, Kari had a daughter, and Kari's daughter was growing up, and we were very much doing this as like a labor of love, like something we both believed in, but it was neither of our jobs. You know, like Kari is a working psychiatrist.
Sure.
And I am a touring musician, you know, doing things other than kids music, basically.
Right.
You know, but we would, every time we had time, we would get together and we'd say, what should be on it? And, you know, Kari's daughter grew up and got old enough to be able to speak to us. And then we were like, Elise, what's missing from this record? And she told us to write the Don't Be Afraid of the Dark song. And, you know, so like the whole thing has really evolved as we've, you know, it's evolved with us.
Sure. So the Brightsiders so this project has been going on for a bit of time then. And you guys just finally put out the record?
10 years ago.
Wow.
10 years ago was the first, was when we met. 10 years in the making.
10 years in the making. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't because there were so many other things going on. And, and we were also really waiting for the right, Kristin, you can correct me, but we were really waiting for the right platform to release the music. Like, we didn't want to just release the music and then that's it, you know. We wanted to wait for the right label, maybe to show interest, or at least to have a platform that we could you know, release the music on. And then and Kristin knew people through all of her work as a professional musician. She knew people that were connected to Smithsonian Folkways. And when they showed interest, it was very exciting for us because I love that label. I love the Smithsonian. I love their mission. And, you know, that's like for me, that's like a dream come true to be associated with the Smithsonian. I grew up with the Smithsonian. Going there, being at the museum, listening to the music. My parents used Folkways in their curriculum. So it was really, really cool to get that interest.
Yeah, definitely. With the record, it's helping children connect to their emotions. And do you feel like this was the time to put the record out because everyone's inside trying to figure out life, or did it just kind of fell that way?
Well, that's an interesting question. So we actually, you know, we finished this record, we'll be honest, like last January, and turned it all in. And we finally, you know, after all the years of working on it, and you know, we sort of like dotted the I's and crossed the T's on our liner notes, sent it into the record label, and it was kind of literally the next week that the pandemic became apparent that the pandemic was going to happen. So this record was going to come out last April, and then sort of got bumped. But I, you know, maybe that's fate, because it does seem that, you know, people are very aware of the emotional toll on their, you know, children, adults, everyone. You know, this pandemic has really brought that conversation to the fore. So hopefully that means that this record is arriving when it's needed.
I feel like
that
it
is a little bit of an accident. Yeah.
I mean, I have a 4-year-old, and oh my goodness, trying to keep him on Zoom calls and all this other nonsense. It's like pretty much impossible. I mean, for like 4 or 5 months, he couldn't even go outside. We have a park that's like literally you could walk there in a minute or two. And it's like he can see it, and we can't go on the toys and any of that. It's all roped off, and it's like, not only is it like intense for adults, but the children are being directly affected as well.
I mean, I think that the kids, in my opinion, as a psychiatrist, I think that it's most difficult for the kids and for the teenagers. Adults have a lot of perspective. We're able to say, okay, this is a really difficult time, but I can remember times where things were really great, and I'm going to remember those and think of those very positively. I'm going to look forward to that time. But kids growing up right now, they're growing up with feeling tremendous stress of climate change, of like political instability, pandemic. It's hard for them to they cannot have perspective. They're not old enough to have perspective. And so, you know, as a parent, you have to sort of just focus on the here and now with them. like you look around in your house. You're like, okay, what's good here? What's fun right now? Like, what can we focus on right now? You're 4. Let's play. Let's do this. It's a challenge, and it's a challenge to engage kids via an online platform as well. They have Zoom fatigue just as much as adults have Zoom fatigue. You're like, hey, you want to do a Zoom class? And the kid's like, no, thanks.
Yeah, I know. And they have to split his class up, his preschool class, into like 2 30-minute little segments because they're trying to do like an hour straight. I'm like, there's no way. And then he had a speech class after that, which added another 30 minutes. I'm like, you think you're going to get a 4-year-old to sit in front of a computer screen for an hour and a half learning?
It's really hard. Most of the kids are just like rolling around on the floor, or they get mad and they just shut the computer. And
yeah, it's been a challenge for sure.
There's a lot of bribery that happens, I think.
Like,
hey, sit here and you can have a cookie.
That's
20
exactly
minutes.
it. Oh, you want a scoop of ice cream? If you sit here and do all these things, I'll let that happen.
Oh my God. It's hard. It's really hard.
And we have a 12-year-old also, and he still, I mean, he understands it and gets what's going on, but it's still like, I'm in the midst of it all. He was like trying to, why can't I go see my friends? Like, he had a couple of friends that were still doing stuff, like, even though it was like totally unsafe. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to expose you to that. I'm sorry.
It's really hard with the teenagers. The teenagers they're like, I'm leaving. I'm going out now.
Right.
There's some people are going to be reflecting on this time of parenting challenges for a long time.
Yeah, and it's like the video games. At least they have that to talk to each other online and play the video games. But it's like that's one thing where I'm like, I don't really want you playing video games all day, but there's nothing else you could do besides sit in your room and play video games all day. It's like
it's right.
It's a real.
Do you feel, Kari, like
challenge?
This is going to be like a generational, like there will be a generation of kids that are marked by this experience somehow? Or do you think they'll just bounce back because kids are rubber?
No, I think that kids are very resilient. I think people in general are very resilient. People have gone through incredibly difficult times. I think about, Goran, my husband, who was in Yugoslavia, at the former Yugoslavia during the time of great conflict and civil war. And, there's a whole generation of people that sort of came to age during that time. And people are very resilient. And I think the difficult thing is for this time are the children who are directly affected by loss. So they lost a grandparent, they lost a parent, or something other than pandemic isolation, like a big major loss that they couldn't deal with in like a healthy, normal way, like getting together with a group of friends and family. I think that's the limitations that the pandemic put on people will be in the time of crisis, preventing people from gathering when they lose a beloved grandparent. I think it's an incredibly difficult thing.
Sure. And especially now when they can't, I mean, they couldn't even see them. You know what I mean? Like, if
exactly. It's just terrible. It's simply a terrible. That's the aspect of the pandemic that is so terrible. It's the loss of life, and then not being able to be together to
like mourn
to
the
grieve,
situation. Yeah,
grieve. To mourn. To not be together, and that's really hard. I think kids that did not face great difficulty or parental depression from job loss. I think they'll come back and they'll be resilient and strong. But there's a lot of kids that are deeply affected by what's happened.
Yeah, definitely.
So, of the topics. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about our record and thinking I was thinking about the topics in the songs on the record, and and I was actually curious what, how because the album is about emotions. It's not about what we're just talking about is very heavy, whereas
Right,
our album is some of the emotions are lighter. It's I mentioned the song about, if you're afraid of the dark, think of the moon and the stars and me are all friends is kind of the message of that song, or The Mad Day, where we learn to take deep breaths, or Forever Friends about moving to a new school and adjusting to change. Each song is kind of its own nugget of an emotional experience that kids would commonly have. And then we, try to get at whatever Kari might say in the therapist's office, try to make that a fun singable chorus in 3 minutes, but sure. I'm curious, how do those lessons apply now, Kari? Is there what are the skills and tools that a kid could learn from these songs that would?
That's what I was curious about too. Are they going to be able to use this record as kind of a coping mechanism?
Yeah, I think this record will facilitate discussions about topics that would happen with or without the pandemic. So actually, things that probably happened with greater intensity with the pandemic. So, for example, getting mad, temper tantrums, that's going to escalate in the setting of isolation or the pandemic. And that's a really fun song, The Mad Day. And it has Ed Helms, who is really committed to both children's mental health and to the bluegrass Americana scene.
That's cool. I didn't realize that he was involved in that. I just know him as being a hilarious actor.
We know Ed. We initially know Ed because he went to Oberlin just a little bit before my partner, who's Chris Eldridge, who's our co-producer on the record also, and Chris, who everybody calls Critter, plays guitar in a band called Punch Brothers. But he went to college, just sort of overlapped with Ed a little bit at Oberlin, and Ed's a huge bluegrass fan. So even before he got into comedy and acting, he was playing bluegrass banjo, and he's great at it. And he writes some songs and plays guitar. He has a band, and Critter would sometimes sit in as a guitar player with that band. That was our initial connection to Ed, was just truly through music. And but Ed is, since he's become successful as an actor, has really given back a lot to the Americana and bluegrass music communities, and he's a big supporter. His project, the Bluegrass Situation, it was something that he sort of started and nurtured out of love. It's something California-based. I'm not even sure what they've grown. They've grown beyond being a once a year event to being just an overall support network kind of for bluegrass and Americana music. So Ed's very involved in that, and has a daughter himself now. And so he was willing to come and sing on this duet in which he plays a mad kid.
That's
cool. It was amazing in the studio to watch him just run lines wild, about
sure.
I get so, being angry makes me feel like a bad kid. And I was like, oh my God, we're actually that's my terrible acting version. But to watch Ed in the studio was a revelation. It was really, really fortunate.
Awesome. It's a song that is more pertinent than ever because, I see children and I see adults. And the universal theme right now in the pandemic, especially for people that, let's just take a person that hasn't lost somebody, hasn't lost their job. They're doing okay. They're working remotely. Their kids are doing online school. They're hanging in there. But the universal theme would be, we are getting extremely mad at each other. We are losing our tempers.
Totally.
We are losing our tempers all the time. We cannot be in our small Brooklyn apartment with each other all of the time. People are not understanding each other. My kid is having a tantrum, and this would be a fun, good song to listen to with a kid, it would be great if we made a video about it someday, because kids respond so well to the video component too.
Sure.
But it's about sort of taking a step back as a kid and saying, okay, let me put a little distance between myself and this angry thought. Let me take a deep breath. And that pulls on some of the theories of cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, acceptance and commitment therapy, where it's putting a little distance between yourself and the emotion. Just because you have a big, big emotion doesn't necessitate a huge, big response. And parents can teach that. And they're not going to, hey, listen, I'm telling you this as a parent of a 4-year-old. You are not going to get it right the first, second, third, not the 10th, not the 20th time, but you're going to continue to practice helping your child put a little distance between their thought, their emotion, and then their reaction, teaching them that they can have a big feeling, but it doesn't have to have a huge reaction, meltdown on the floor.
Sure.
And a lot of kids will naturally get that, developmentally. They sort of age into being able to control their reactions, but they need help with that. They need guidance. And the pandemic is a good time to practice that. It's a good time for parents to practice that, because as a parent, you probably notice that you lose your temper a little bit more during this time.
Of course. Well, thank you guys so much for. Sorry, go ahead. The normal.
Yeah, yeah. So practicing like compassion with yourself, with your kids, forgiveness, acceptance, tolerance, practicing skills. That's really what the Brightsiders music is about. It's a big collaboration of lots of Americana artists. Lots of great artists who are committed to healthy emotional development for children. And it takes a village sort of thing. And we have this great village of people that came together for this album, which is really great.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you before I let you go. I have another one right after this, but I want to know if I can get one answer from you guys, if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Kristin, that would be
when
you.
When to do what you love. When you find something that you love actually doing in the moment, just do more of that, and then do more and more and more of that, and trust that if you do something you love, you will become good at it, and it will somehow come back at you. You will reap the benefits. Just lean into what you love.
Oh, that sort of goes back to Disney World. I would say to people, I would say play and practice and listen to the music that you love. That's what I would say to like kids and teenagers and anybody actually. If you want it, play the music that you love.